It's member-supported Hawaii Public Radio and All Things Considered. I'm Dave Lawrence, and we are having some time with a very special guest who we had on the program recently, Billy Cobham, one of my favorite drummers. He's had the Blue Note. He has this Crosswinds project that he's been doing, this revisiting of some of his classic work. We're really lucky because he's agreed to spend a little bit more time with us, kind of continue our conversation from the other day. Thank you so much. Aloha, mahalo. Welcome back after over 40 years.
It's a pleasure to be here, Dave. Yeah.
Well, thanks for doing it. And we were just talking, it's big difference in terms of the skyline and some of the things that you might see. Billy's last time here wasn't just a regular old show, huh? It was a pretty big deal. It was the 1973 Mahavishnu Santana.
44, 45 years, something like that, yeah.
What's a memory from that sticks out? Is there anything that you...
Really, to be honest, lots of gray areas. I'm not sure.
I mean, just the tour in general, even if it's not from Hawaii, when you think of that was the last time we had you here.
Mm-hmm. To be in the shade of one giant individual by the name of Larry Young, with the Cheshire Cat smile from Alice in Wonderland, and a big Panama hat and a muumuu is purple, and just talking, hey Larry, what's that name? Look, because he was 6 foot. Larry was 6'7". You know, it was like Raonic on the tennis court, you know, except twice the size, width and height, and for me, and just a wonderful person, always having little conversations about nothing. You know, and I should say the climate was correct for me. You know, so that's one of the reasons why I went back home to Panama, because it's not as warm there as it is here, but because we get that breeze coming down off the volcano, our volcano, which is one volcano, the Baru, and it's always a little bit dry and cooler, but it's still 34 degrees, you know, that's all right all the time. So cool.
It's amazing when you have that consistency. I know what you mean. It changes your thinking too with weather and all that.
Yeah. And at my age, at 74 now, God, you know, willing to get to May, I feel it now. I mean, I just left in California. It was raining. Okay. Relatively warm in comparison to other. Seattle was colder, farther north, and my body was just aching with, you know, I feel like, yeah, if I'm a snowbird, I need to get out of here now. And here we go, we're going to Honolulu. Sure enough, we got here, and everything just eased open, you know. Oh, baby, it feels so good. And, yeah, I'd like to stay. But I can't. We have to go back to Detroit. So there you go.
What a welcome back to the mainland that is.
Man, with a snowball. You know.
Right? That really is going back there. Well, hopefully you'll be safe. And thinking about roots, as we think about, you know, talking about Panama and you explained how your dad, I'm trying to think of things we didn't answer the other day. You explained how he started you on the drums at 4, but we never discussed what your first paying gig was. Again, it's 8 years old.
Well, it wasn't meant to be one. He didn't have my dad. He didn't have a drummer. He played piano most of the time by himself, and in these bars. And it was he being a more of a what do you call these guys? He had a great mind for numbers and organization, things like this. Really strong in mathematics, and but it wasn't enough in those days to earn a really strong living for family. So he enhanced his chances by taking a page out of his brother's book, his older brother, my Uncle Edwin, who was a pianist and studied the instrument on a level that was my grandparents put him in that direction. And of course his younger brother, my dad, sat next to him and watched and all of that. And when he got up, he would try the same thing, and eventually it started to rub off. So when we got to the United States, he took this trick, as he called it, and he went into a bar here or there, and he would say, wow, what a nice place to be, you know. And the guy said, yeah, there's not a lot of clients here. Yeah, okay, cool. He said, wow, it's a beautiful piano you have up there behind the bar here. Does it work? He said, of course it works. You want to try it? I said, do you play piano? A little bit, and say, well, go up, take a tinkle, And he'd go up and he'd start playing, and the guy would turn around and look at him and say, "You can play. You would put me on," and I didn't say anything. Don't say anything. The guy says, "My dad would say, hey, so who's working here? Who's playing?" "Oh, we don't have anybody. It's too expensive, and there's not a lot of people coming in." Says, "How about if I just played for the door or played for tips?" "Okay." And the rest was history. People would come in, he'd be playing. First few days, of course, it didn't work, but he'd be playing. People started coming back because they heard this pretty good piano player and everything. Next thing you know, they'd get drunk. They'd offer him whatever they had in their pockets, which was probably all the money they got for working that week before. And you'd say, "Well, what do you want to hear?" Or, that this is how we do it. And they said, "Well, do you know this or that? This Sweet Lorraine or something like this?" Wow. And he'd go, "I don't know." Of course he knew it. He said, "Sing it and let me know. Sing it. Maybe I can follow you." Of course, the guy would sing out of tune, drunk, whatever, and my father would follow him. Now, that turned some heads. And they said, "Man, you're real. You sounded good. You should do that more often, man. You should be up in front of your own band." Next thing was, guy paid him his own paycheck and stayed, owed the bar money, and we had a decent living. But getting back to me, one day there was no drummer. Sometimes he'd work with somebody that'd come in and play drums.
So he'd have other musicians sometimes.
He'd be given other musicians, and because my father never paid any band.
Wasn't organized.
Yeah. So this time he said, "Hey, Junior," or Junie as they called me, "there's a drum set." He joking me. He said, "You busy?" I said, "No." "Okay, come with me." And my mom would go, "Thank the Lord, I don't have a kid to worry about." Right. And we'd go off, and I sat on top of the drums, and he said, "Okay, play." And we started playing something, and I tried my best to follow him, and we'd have a good time. And I noticed that he talked to a lot of other musicians. I'd hear conversations about pay, how the pay was, and what you had to do, and what the union situation was like at the time. The cabaret license and where you had to go. It was a New York City taxi cab company that you had to get the cabaret license from for the musicians and artists, all that kind of stuff, because it was run by a very, very devious little organization that we won't mention at the time, that sort of was parallel to everything else that you got. It could get you anything on the black market if you want, if you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So next thing you know, I opened my big mouth one day, and he said, "Dad," he said, "Yeah?" He said, "How much did I earn for 8 years old?" He said, "You earn when did you earn something?" I said, "Well, we played a gig this Sunday, but you never paid me any money." It was out of the mouths of babes, And he said, "Okay, sit down here. Let me explain to you how this works." I said, "Yeah." He says, "You ready?" He says, "Yeah." He said, when you were born into a house, right?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You ever pay rent in that house?" I said, "No." He said, "How about food? You ever, have food come in the house? Do you ever pay for the food?" "No." "How about school?" "No." "No. You know what insurance is?" "No." He said, "But if something were to happen to you and you got hurt, who'd pay for that?" I said, "Well, you." He said, "Uh-huh. Okay. So all in all, how much should I pay you in return when you owe me for all these different things?" Now I'm like confused. I said, "Oh, but I thought," he said, No, it's not for free. It's just that I haven't asked for it yet." Then he took out 50 cents and gave it to me. 50 cents might have been $5 now. Yeah.
So it was a little something.
Oh, he gave me something. I wasn't going to walk away with nothing. But it was a lesson. He gave me
huge lesson.
A lesson. Yeah.
It's a big lesson. I mean, it's you think of
I remember it now. Mm-hmm.
all your parents have done for you, and he laid it out and really
They never. That's right.
and we all been in that spot.
Oh, tell me.
We all know it. We all know that. We didn't always have our dad explain it like that. What about mom? That's something we didn't touch on last time.
Miles. How can I put it? It started all with him through Jack DeJohnette. I mean, of course, coming out of Horace, out of the Army, I was on tour with Horace, and we played Laurel Racetrack, a festival called the Laurel Jazz Festival. I think that's still happening in Maryland. That was the last time I played it, as far as I know. Was '68 as a drummer with Horace, and the star attraction was Miles Davis Quintet with Ron and Tony and Herbie and Wayne, I think, or George Coleman back then. I'm not sure. So whatever. I didn't meet him then. I was as close as I thought I'd ever come to meeting him. Was on that gig.
You guys were opening.
Yeah, as an opener to Miles at the Laurel Racetrack in Maryland, and I met Tony, and he was normal, crotchety self at the age of 17, but that's to be expected. Here's a guy who's, he wore the emperor's new clothes and didn't even know. I mean, he was there. Everybody saw him as being the second coming of Christ, whatever, and everyone knew jazz. So under the music under the heading of jazz at the time needed something very, very dramatic, and he was it. Bap played very special, and Alan Dawson. I don't think it's all Alan Dawson's thing, but when I listen to Alan or watch what Alan does as well as listen, I see the connection. It's wonderful, wonderful ways that he transferred his ideas through to Tony. To some degree, but Tony then took it to another level. And instead of playing a lot more notes or playing as many notes as Alan, he played less. And he saw them more as I got to know him, more as a color, shades. And so he wouldn't always play the patterns in the same place. But what was impeccable about him was his sense of timing and where he would play, what he would play, when he would play it. So it had a personality that his ideas were projected through this drum set in such a way that made it very, very unique, especially when you consider who was playing bass and how conventionally strict he was, yet, especially at that time, which was Ron Carter. Ron was on the money, spot on, all the time. And he didn't deviate a whole lot from that until around 1967. Then things changed. And I could feel the difference. But with that, and that I think that it had a lot to do with, of course, playing over and over with Herbie and Tony and Wayne. Miles is just floating on top of anything. Miles was, in a way, for me, he was beyond failure. Anything he played would be okay. So anything, and that's the funny part, because even though you had a phenomenal musician as Coltrane, he couldn't hold that mantle. He had to have a specific band behind him. Thus McCoy, Elvin, Jimmy, for sure. Everything else didn't come up to the speed. But Miles didn't play all the notes. And Train played, in some cases, so much information came from him that was absolutely spot on. I mean, the ideas were, I get it. But it drove me away because I couldn't digest everything. It was just too much coming, man.
Whereas Miles had all these other cats providing it in addition to him.
Well, it was Miles. It was about Miles, and I'm comparing how Miles approached playing a solo or playing and conveying his messages through his instrument, as opposed to Train. You could listen to Miles every day because he gave you a chance to digest what he played. I could not listen to A Love Supreme or anything else. After that, sometimes it took me 12 months to 18 months to digest what was done on A Love Supreme, and I kept going back to the first tune. You're going, no, that's not true. He didn't do that. Yeah, he did. And it was like 18 months later, I said, man, I can't believe I'm listening to this again. Wow, I didn't know he played that. 18 months, because it was just so deep. Whereas Miles was so deep, yet I go, wow, listen to that G. It's just pure sine wave. Or the B flat would carry over through the F minor chord, through the C. I mean, it just keep going, and that one note would work for 8 bars. And you go, makes sense to me, So you tended to lean in that direction more than in the other direction where the amount of information was just beyond understanding.
I see why you're such a legendary cat, man. Your thinking is like, no pun intended, miles beyond.
Well, I mean, then having, when you bring up those names, and I mean, it just triggers a lot of stuff,
I bet.
And the cats in between, like Miles, Train. Who's in between in the front line? Cannonball. Hello? And right in the middle of all of that, he's playing stuff that would fit into anybody's category at any time of day or night. And you just want to just sort of dance with him all the way through. You couldn't dance with Train. There was no room to tap, And you could float with Miles because he allowed you to imagine. But with Cannon and Nat, those cats made you get up and dance, You didn't even know you were doing that. And it was just that kind of group on the same tune. It was amazing. And then in solos like Blue and Green or something like this, oh gosh, it was just so beautiful. To hear those 3 different concepts come across and all the information that pointed to study fundamentally, and when I have my school, the Art of the Rhythm Section retreat, we discuss those approaches to playing in jazz, and then you turn around and you get, you stop and you think about it and you go, wow. Now let's listen to Steely Dan, and boom. Hey, 19, bap. No, we can be together, bap. And it's all they're doing. Meanwhile, everybody's moving. And because the one thread through all of that is that all these different people mean exactly what they say through the instrument. It's real. It is true. It is not false. It's definitely true.
Can I appreciate when we mentioned the rock, and there's 2 cats that I play drums. I used to play drums. Now that I don't have a kit with me, but I've always maintained like the rhythm to be able to use like all 4 of my my legs and my hands. So I've always been curious. There are 2 rock guys you're like one of my very, very favorite drummers, and there are 2 other cats among that, and they're both rock guys. So I was going to tell you who my 2 favorites are, and like kind of get what you think about them, and just like you say what you think honestly about them, okay? And
I don't have a choice.
Yeah. Well, I know. I know you won't hold back. All right, so they would be, and then it would be one more like you with the double bass, Cozy Powell, and John Bonham from Zeppelin.
I didn't know John Bonham well enough. I heard him play a couple of things pattern-wise that reminded me of him, reminded me of myself. But I went, okay, so maybe I got these ideas from him. But we were contemporaries. I'm not sure that he might have heard me all, except down at the Fillmore East from one time to another, because I was down there with different bands, including Miles. But I wasn't playing that way. So he'd play diddle-ya, 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 and I went, okay, I hadn't even noticed. Until now, I said, fine, you never know where you get these ideas from. It could be that I got it from him. I don't know. he held together a very fine band, obviously. I don't know, where did John Bonham come from before Led Zeppelin?
I think it was like he and Robert in something called the Band of Joy, I think it was called, or something like that. So they were like, they hadn't done a whole bunch. He was like sort of like a, I don't think he had a whole ton of experience prior to that. I don't really know.
I see. I'm just wondering.
What about Cozy?
Cozy, I knew, and he was just like, again, he played right smack in the middle of the beat all the time. He had a very good sense of timing. Of time, and he'd come around to my clinics from time to time. We never played together, but he was hell-bent on the technical aspects of things, and so for me, he was the academic rhythmicist. There are cats out there today, I mean, they've always been, who play extremely well, and with all the patterns, rock and this and numbers and blah, blah, blah. You can do this, you can do that. And then there's the musical aspects of application of all of that. And that's another dimension unto itself. So I rarely ever hear an academician playing musically. I hear them playing intrinsically, mathematically, numbers, exactly right, nothing wrong. But now we've got to make that flow. We've got to round the edges off. I remember when I was in military bands and drum corps, and we'd play, and it would start 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and we're marking time to this, Okay, and then you take someone like Elvin. You go, Downfall of Paris, and it was still the same Downfall of Paris, but it was so much more musical and so much more human, and you realize back in those days, I gotta get my act together. I want to play the Downfall of Paris like that. I want to play a march, but I want to groove. I want to make the march groove. So I started to get into these ideas of taking a march like the Downfall of Paris or Under the Double Eagle, stuff like that, with marching, and playing them in 6/8, or playing it as a salsa. Imagining in my head that I have a congas and playing that way, that pattern against what a communal drumming conjunto would do. And boy, did I get messed up. I mean, it just trying to flow like they did, but play this pattern as it was for its sincere, keeping it sincere. And that's how I started to get out of this. I started to get to multitask a lot in my mind, where I'm thinking, I'm hearing two different things at once, and I'm trying to make them both work together and going down the same path. It can be done.
You're such an incredible cat to talk with, and just like, it's so deep, man. And the double bass, you rallied to it. What made you want that thing?
Well, Pearl Bailey. It's true, but Pearl Bailey had a partner. His name was Louis Belson, and he was the first cat to do it. And he was, for all intents and purposes, my mentor. Him, a few of them. Him, Vic Firth, Fred Daniel Hinger, who was a timpanist, who was with the Pittsburgh Symphony, and then he went with the Metropolitan. He was the guy that made Hinger's drumsticks. He made all these funny drumsticks out of aluminum. He made mallets out of aluminum, snare drum sticks out of aluminum. Lives in Leonia, New Jersey. He made his own timpani. He had hands that could just, you didn't want to shake his hands. Right. Because he tuned his drums with a chain, and he tuned them by hand. So the chain was very quiet because he kept it well oiled, but he also had these rubber balls that went around, so they stayed on track. And he would just change pitches because he was playing in the Met. They were doing things like Peter Grimes, Benjamin Britten, all of and a lot of timpani changes. and he didn't have time to push up and down, so he just changed it, with his hands. And little guy looked like Popeye here. I mean, like huge.
You got big hands too. When I look at you,
oh man, his would double.
No, I believe it. I'm not saying.
I'm saying, and he would just change, and he made a set of timpani for me that are now. I sold to the University of Arizona's School of Conservatory Music. I did that 25 years ago. Just still up to speed. No one makes timpani Fred Hinger's long gone, man. He was one of these people. He made snare drums. He made the snare drum I played with Mahavishnu that weighed like 35 pounds. It was made from a big piece of steel, and Coney cut it. Made the bearing edges, everything himself. It was an amazing man. And also, he decided one day that we had too much of a problem with garbage. So Hinger decided, as an environmentalist back then, to make drums from recycled daily newspapers. So he knew a place that was compressing the paper, the garbage. So he made that, and they were making cylinders from it. So what he did was he went and then he polyurethaned everything on the inside and the outside to harden it. And because I was just coming online with Tama, he'd made me a drum set that looked like it was a Gretsch set, but it wasn't. Out of that, it was all, and taxi cab yellow, and I eventually sold them. They were wonderful. As a matter of fact, those drums, that's the drums you hear on the Crossings album.
You did have the clear kind too, like Bonham for a while.
Yeah, that was the Fibes drum set. Bonham had something else.
But they were clear kind of.
They were clear, period. They were pet they're not fiberglass, they were I forget, not petroglass, I forget what it was called, but it's a clear plastic. And I used that with Mahavishnu for about a year and a half. Yeah.
Always sounded awesome. Gonna sound awesome tonight. Huge thrill that you take so much time to reflect. You did the other day. You were very, very generous, and I really appreciate you going through your memory banks with us. The Crosswinds tour going to be followed up. Well, hopefully, I'm going to cross my fingers. It's not going to be 40 years till you come back to Hawaii.
Oh, it would be fun to get back here in the next year or so and do this, because I know I've got this project that I'm developing right now. I have a very favorite couple people or group of people that I love to work with. I don't get a chance to work with very often. The bass player is Ron Carter, keyboard player is Kenny Barron, and we have a trio called The Art of Three. And it's a throwback, retro kind of trio where we go back and we also do a little show called that's discussing how rhythm sections used to function and learn tunes. Because it was a time when we used to learn everything because we played it every day for 6 weeks in one location. So we end up with 150 to 200 tunes or thereabouts. Same pieces, different keys, all of that. For 6 weeks at the half note, and then 2 weeks off, and next thing you know, you were at the 5 spot, 2 weeks off. Next thing you know, you were at the blue note, 2 weeks off, and then Cookery, 2 weeks off, Cotton Club, 2 weeks off. Never left New York. Parrot, Red Parrot, Hickory House with somebody else, and they would call these tunes, or they wouldn't even call them. They just start to play an intro, and you start to wonder what key, what tune. What kind of groove this is, and it would come out bossa, whatever was popular. It was always a little trio behind the bar, with guys selling liquor to people. Like most of the place was empty for 6 weeks. School, that was pure school. So for me to hear all these tunes, the names of the tunes became irrelevant. But what we could do was I could call them, and this goes back to maybe 2001, was an idea. I said, what happens? The promoter said, man, it would be great to have you come with a small group, and it would be, because we can't pay a lot of bucks. And an idea. I said, what happens if I got Kenny Barron and Ron Carter? Well, it's very expensive. We couldn't do it. I said, But if we just did try it, 3-4 dates, see if anybody would be interested. So they came back and they said, we got 4 bites. Naples, La Spezia, Copenhagen, I think, or another town just out of Copenhagen, and Oslo. I said, okay, it's just the 3 of us. I don't need drums. Kenny doesn't need piano. Ron, at the time, could still take his bass. We had one tech who was chief cook, bottle washer, everything, manager, but he was a good guy, chiller. And we went ahead and played 4 shows in 6 days or 5 days, and we never played to less than 3,000 people anywhere. And the thing about it is that Kenny, I called him maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks before. It was just something just to throw together. And he said, well, I'll be in Montevideo, Uruguay. And Ron said, I'm in New York. I said, okay, how about just meet me? We had a sound check, was an hour. What do you want to play? I don't know. Well, what do you want to play? Okay, let's just start something. Okay. And that's exactly what we did. So now we do this at the Art of the Rhythm Section retreat in the summer. And we talk about how those things came together based on what we've experienced in our
Makes
life.
good stories, too.
Yes. And one thing leads to the other, and now we have, this presentation. And again, from time to time, we might work with George Benson or somebody like that, because all they have to do is walk on the bandstand and do something that is kind of a breath, like a breath of fresh air, or Tony Bennett or somebody who goes, so and so and so, San Francisco in his key or in another key because his range is now different. Everybody just go, okay.
That'd be a perfect thing for here.
So it's just like that kind of thing. But how you do it, and what brought you to do it. So we talk about that too.
Well, it'll be the kind of real interactive, like you're saying. People will learn something from it, and they'll also be able to see something special.
Because it's about the history, and if you know why it happened, then you see why it's happening. Then you get it. You say, okay, cool. Now, I see where it's coming from, and now I know where I can take it because I know where it was before.
It'd be a great follow-up to this, and now you got something to set your mind on, so we're not going to have a 40-year vacancy again with the great Billy Cobham. And I hope you had a good time today. I love talking to you, brother.
Thanks, man. I hope so. It'd be great to do it.
And thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure's mine.